Obinna, 200,000 naira. One trip, Lagos and back. Your mama's hospital bill settled, just like that. Wetin dey inside the package, Chidi? You no need to know wetin dey inside. You just carry am, deliver am, collect your money. See, my mother held my hand on that hospital bed. She looked me in the eye and she said, do not let anyone use hunger to buy your integrity. If I break that promise, Chidi, then I am truly broke.
There is a saying among our people. They say, the goat that stays too long in the market eventually forgets the road home. Remember that. It will mean something before this story is over. Now, let me tell you about a young man named Obinna. Obinna Chukwemeka Ninwosu, born in a small compound in Nsukka, raised by a woman who sold groundnuts and akara by the roadside so that her son could sit inside a university lecture hall someday. That woman, his mother, her name was Adaeze. And if you ever met her, you would remember two things: the gap in her front teeth when she smiled, and the way she spoke about her son like he was already somebody, even when he was nobody. Obinna was not the smartest boy in his class growing up. He was not the fastest. He didn't have a father who drove a long car or an uncle who worked in the ministry. What he had was a mother who woke up every day at 4:30 in the morning, who fried akara in the dark before the sun could rise, who counted 50 naira notes with swollen fingers and whispered to herself, "This one is for Obinna's school fees. This one is for Obinna's textbook." She did that for years, year after year. She did it until her fingers knew the feel of every denomination by touch alone. She did it until her knees began to swell from standing too long. She did it until the doctor at the community health center told her something that she kept to herself for a very long time. But we will get to that. First, let me take you to the place where this story truly begins. The University of Nigeria, Nsukka, year 2023. Obinna was in his final year studying mechanical engineering. 4 years he had already spent. 4 long years of reading under candlelight, of eating gari and groundnuts when money was too thin for rice, of borrowing textbooks from course-mates and returning them the next morning before the owner woke up. 4 years of surviving, and now, finally, he could see the finish line. His project was half complete. His supervisor had approved his topic. The external examiner visit was scheduled. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, a message appeared in the department WhatsApp group. Obinna read it while sitting on the edge of his bed in his small room of campus, the one he shared with 2 other boys in a building where the ceiling leaked when it rained. The message said, ASUU declares indefinite strike effective immediately. He read it again. He read it 3 times. Then he locked his phone and placed it face down on the mattress. Now, you see, if this had been the first time, or even the second, maybe Obinna would have felt shock. Maybe he would have shouted. Maybe he would have gone to the Students' Union office and raised his voice with the others. But this was not the first time. This was not the second time. By Obinna's own counting, this was the 7th strike he had experienced since he entered the university. The 7th. Some of them lasted weeks, some lasted months. One had lasted almost an entire year. 7 strikes. Think about that for a moment. A boy who should have graduated in 4 years had now spent nearly 7 in the university. Not because he failed, not because he was lazy, but because every time he was close to finishing, the ground would shift beneath his feet. So this time, when the message came, Obinna didn't shout. He didn't curse. He sat there on the edge of his bed, very still, and he let the silence sit with him. Because sometimes, when life has disappointed you enough times, you stop reacting and you start calculating. His roommate, Chidi, walked in a few minutes later. Chidi was the kind of boy who always had something to say, loud, friendly. The type who knew everybody on campus and everybody knew him. Chidi read the same message and threw his phone on the bed. Again, Chidi said, just that one word. And the way he said it, You could hear everything in it. The tiredness, the frustration, the slow, heavy acceptance. Obinna nodded. So wetin we go do now? Chidi asked. Obinna didn't answer. He was thinking about his mother. He was thinking about the phone call he had received from his younger sister, Nkechi, 2 weeks ago. The one where Nkechi's voice was too careful, too measured. The way people speak when they are trying to hold something heavy without dropping it. Brother, Nkechi had said on the phone that night, Mama's body is not doing well. The doctor said it has spread. Obinna had closed his eyes when he heard those words. He pressed the phone harder against his ear, as if getting closer to the speaker would somehow change what was being said. Spread to where? He had asked. There was silence on the other end. Then Nkechi said, her liver. They said it has reached her liver. Obinna did not cry that night. He wanted to, but the tears sat behind his eyes like water behind a dam, pressing, finding no release. Instead, he lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, unevenly, making that faint clicking sound that it always made. His mother had cancer. She had known for over a year before she told anyone. By the time Nkechi took her to the teaching hospital in Enugu, the thing had already settled deep inside her body, comfortable, like a tenant who had no plans to leave. And here is what you need to understand about Adaeze. Even in that hospital bed, with tubes in her arm and a drip bag hanging above her head, the first thing she asked Nkechi was, has Obinna's school fees been paid? That was his mother. That was the kind of woman she was. Her body was failing, her organs were surrendering one by one, and her mind was still on her son's future. Now, 2 weeks after that phone call, Obinna was sitting in his room with the news of another strike, and his world had become very small. Small like the inside of a box. He could feel the walls pressing in. Let me explain what a strike means for a boy like Obinna, because some people hear the word and they think it simply means a holiday, a break. No. For Obinna, a strike meant that time, which was already against him, now turned into his enemy. It meant his project, which was almost finished, would gather dust. It meant the money his mother had scraped together for this semester. The money that came from selling her sewing machine and two of her wrappers. That money would not be enough when school resumed because prices would have gone up. Hostel fees would increase. Handout prices would increase. Everything would increase. But his mother's income, what was left of it, would remain the same, or less, because she was now in a hospital bed. The first week of the strike passed quietly. Obinna stayed in his room. He reread his project work. He helped a neighbor repair a generator for small money. He called his mother every evening. Their conversations were short and careful, each one protecting the other from the full weight of what they were feeling. Mama, how your body? He would ask. I am fine, my son. God is in control. How is school? School is fine, Mama. Neither of them mentioned the strike. Neither of them mentioned the cancer spreading. They spoke in the language of love, which sometimes means saying less than what you know. It was in the second week that something changed. Chidi came to the room one evening with a different energy, not his usual loudness. Something else. He was quieter, more focused, like a man who had made a decision. Obinna, I want to show you something, Chidi said. He sat on the plastic chair by the window and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. But you have to hear me out before you say anything. Obinna looked at him and waited. Chidi told him about a man called Oga Tony. He described Oga Tony as a businessman who operated between Lagos and Onitsha. According to Chidi, Oga Tony ran a network. The network did something simple. They received packages from one location and delivered them to another. That was it. Receive and deliver. And for each successful delivery, the carrier, the person who physically moved the package, earned 200,000 naira. 200,000 naira. Let that number settle for a moment. For a boy like Obinna, that was more than an entire semester's expenses. That was textbooks, feeding, accommodation, even enough left over to send something home. 200,000 naira for a single trip. Obinna listened. He didn't interrupt. Chidi continued. He said that some of the boys in their department were already doing it. He mentioned names. Boys Obinna knew. Boys who had suddenly started wearing better clothes, eating at better restaurants. Boys who now had new phones and moved differently. Boys who had been just as broke as him weeks before. What's in the packages? Obinna asked. Chidi hesitated. It was a small hesitation, barely a second, but Obinna caught it. It was the kind of pause that tells you everything. You no need to know wetin dey inside, Chidi said. That's the arrangement. You carry you deliver you collect your money. Nobody asks questions. Obinna looked at him. He looked at him for a long time. And in that silence, both of them understood what was not being said. Whatever was in those packages was not legal. It didn't matter if it was drugs or fraud documents or stolen goods. The pay was too high and the secrecy was too thick for it to be anything clean. Chidi, Obinna said quietly, you know say I no fit do this kind thing. Chidi leaned back. He wasn't surprised. He had expected this answer, but he wasn't finished. Obinna, hear me, Chidi said. I know they tell you to do forever, just one trip, one. That 200k go solve your problem for this semester. And by the time ASUU call off strike, you go don settle, your mama no go need to sell anything again. Those last words, your mama no go need to sell anything again. Chidi knew exactly where to aim. It wasn't manipulation, not really. Chidi was his friend. Chidi had seen Obinna eat Gary for dinner 5 nights in a row. Chidi had seen him count transport money in small coins. Chidi had watched him quietly borrow data to submit assignments online, then go without a phone connection for days. Chidi knew the weight that Obinna carried. And in his own way, Chidi believed he was offering a solution. Obinna told him he would think about it. And Chidi left. That night, Obinna couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and his mind became a courtroom. 2 voices argued back and forth, each one making its case. One voice said, just one trip. Nobody will know. You carry the package, you collect the money, and you move on with your life. Think of your mother. Think of the hospital bills. Think of Nkechi, who had to drop out of secondary school so the family could afford your university. Think of them. The other voice was quieter. It didn't argue with logic. It simply replayed a memory. A memory from 3 months ago when Obinna visited his mother in the hospital. Let me take you there. The hospital in Enugu was the kind of place where hope and despair lived side by side. The walls were painted a faded green that might have been cheerful once, but had long since become the color of waiting. The corridors smelled like disinfectant and something else underneath, something human and fragile. Obinna found his mother in the female ward, bed number 7. She was thinner than the last time he had seen her. Her cheekbones were more visible. Her wrists looked like they could snap. But when she saw him, she smiled that gap-toothed smile, and for one moment, one brief moment, she looked like the woman who used to chase him around the compound with a cane when he stole meat from the pot. He sat beside her bed. Nkechi was there too, sitting on a wooden bench by the wall, her eyes redder from lack of sleep. Nkechi was 19. She should have been in school. Instead, she was here, measuring medication doses and learning to change IV bags because there weren't enough nurses. They talked for a while. Small talk. How is the weather in Isuka? Is the landlord still disturbing about the water bill? Normal things. The kind of conversation you have when the abnormal is too heavy to hold. Then, at some point, Nkechi left the room to buy food from the woman who sold jollof rice near the hospital gate, and it was just the two of them, mother and son. Adeze reached out and took Obinna's hand. Her grip was weak, but there was intention in it. Purpose. Obinna, she said, and her voice was softer than he remembered, like fabric that had been washed too many times. I want to tell you something, and I want you to listen well. He nodded. I know things are hard, she said. I know say this sickness don't change everything. I know say money is not there. I know say sometimes you know they eat well. I know all these things, even though you and your sister think say you they hide from me. She paused to gather her breath. The effort of speaking was visible on her face. But Obinna, hear me. In this life, the only thing a person truly owns is their name. Not money, not house, not car. Your name, the name I gave you. Obinna, father's heart. You carry your father's heart, even though he is no longer here. And that name, when people hear it, what will they think? What will they say? She squeezed his hand. My son, whatever happens, whatever this life brings to you, do not let anyone use hunger to buy your integrity. Do you hear me? Do not let hard times turn you into what you are not. I would rather die on this bed, knowing that my son is poor but clean than recover, and hear that my son has money, but his hands are dirty. She looked at him directly. Her eyes, even in their tiredness, were steady, clear. Promise me, Obinna. Promise your mother. And he did. He looked at her and he said, I promise, Mama. She smiled. She patted his hand. And then she closed her eyes and rested. Now, lying on his bed in his small room off campus, with Chidi's offer hanging in the air like smoke, Obinna replayed that scene. He heard his mother's voice. He felt the weakness of her grip. He remembered the look in her eyes, the way she held him with her gaze, as if she was transferring something to him, something invisible and permanent. A promise, but promises are easy to make in hospital rooms. Promises feel simple when your mother is looking at you with eyes full of love and trust. It is later, when you are alone, when the money is finished, when the strike has scattered your plans, when the landlord is threatening, when your sister calls to say the hospital is demanding payment before they will continue treatment. That is when a promise becomes heavy. That is when you discover what it truly costs to keep your word. The third week of the strike came, and with it came a phone call that changed everything. Nkechi called on a Wednesday morning. She was crying, not loudly. Nkechi was not the type to cry loudly. She cried the way water leaks from a cracked pot, slowly, steadily, with a kind of inevitability. Brother, they say we have to pay 150,000 before Friday, or they will discharge Mama. They said they cannot keep treating her for free. The drugs alone, brother. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. 150,000 naira. Obinna held the phone and felt the number sit on his chest like a concrete block. Where would he find that kind of money? His account had less than 3,000 naira. His mother's savings were finished. The relatives who used to help had grown tired. That is the thing about prolonged illness in a family without wealth. At first, people contribute. They rally. They send money and send prayers. But as the weeks become months and the months become a year, the contributions slow down. The phone calls reduce. The prayers become quieter. Not because people are wicked, but because everyone is fighting their own battle. Everyone is carrying their own load. 150,000 naira. And Chidi's offer sitting right there. 200,000 naira for one trip. Obinna could feel something shifting inside him. It was like standing on the edge of a riverbank and feeling the soil begin to loosen under your feet. You know you shouldn't step forward. You know the current is strong, but the ground behind you is also giving way, and there is nowhere to stand that feels safe. He called Chidi. That thing you talked about, Obinna said. The delivery. When is the next one? Chidi was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Saturday where? Lagos. We go travel down on Friday night, collect the package Saturday morning, deliver am by Saturday evening. We go there back Nsukka by Sunday. Obinna closed his eyes. How does it work? Tell me everything. Chidi explained. Oga Tony would arrange transportation. They would take a night bus from Nsukka to Lagos. In Lagos, they would go to an address in Alaba. At that address, someone would hand them a bag. They would take the bag to another address in Lekki. Someone there would receive it. The money would be paid immediately after delivery. Cash, 200,000. And if something goes wrong? Obinna asked. Another pause. Nothing go wrong, Chidi said. The boys who don't do before, nothing happened to them. Obinna knew that this was not a real answer. Nothing has happened yet is not the same as nothing can happen. But fear and desperation have a way of making weak assurances sound like guarantees. Okay, Obinna said. I'll do it. The word left his mouth, and the moment it did, he felt something, a sensation he couldn't name. It wasn't relief, it wasn't fear. It was something in between, something like the feeling you get when you walk through a door and hear it lock behind you. He didn't sleep well that night. He kept hearing his mother's voice. Do not let anyone use hunger to buy your integrity. The words echoed in his mind like a song stuck on repeat. Thursday came. Obinna went through day like a man walking underwater. Everything felt slow. Everything felt distant. He went to the mechanic workshop where he sometimes helped out for small money, but his hands were clumsy. He dropped a wrench twice. His mind was not there. In the afternoon, he walked to the campus. The university was quiet. There is something unsettling about a university during a strike. The buildings are still there. The lecture halls, the laboratories, the library, they are all still standing. But without students moving through them, without voices and footsteps, and the chaos of academic life, the place feels like a body without breath. It looks the same, but something essential is missing. Obinna walked to the mechanical engineering building. He stood outside and looked at it. He thought about how many hours he had spent in those rooms, studying, arguing with course mates about thermodynamics, rushing to meet assignment deadlines. He thought about how close he was to finishing. Final year, project almost done, everything almost complete. And then ASUU had struck again, the seventh time. He remembered a joke someone had made in the WhatsApp group. ASUU strike is like a parent who beats you and then asks why you are crying. It was funny in the way that only painful things can be funny. He stood there for a long time. Then he turned and walked back. That evening, something happened that Obinna did not expect. His phone rang. It was his mother. Now Adeze rarely called Obinna. Usually, it was him who called her. She had told Nkechi to limit her phone use to save battery and airtime. So when Obinna saw Mama on his screen, a part of him froze. He answered, Obinna. Her voice was thin, like thread pulled too tight. But it was her. It was unmistakably her. Mama, good evening. Are you okay? Is everything alright? I am fine, my son. I just wanted to hear your voice. Something about the way she said it made Obinna sit down slowly. He sat on the floor of his room, his back against the wall, and he pressed the phone to his ear. Mama, I am here. Obinna, your sister told me about the hospital bill. She didn't want to, but I heard her talking to the doctor. Obinna felt his throat tighten. Don't worry, Mama. I will handle it. I will find the money. How? She asked. And the question was not accusatory. It was not suspicious. It was simply a question. The honest, open question of a mother who knew her son's pockets were empty. I will find a way, Mama. There was a pause. A long one. Obinna could hear the sounds of the hospital in the background. A trolley being wheeled somewhere. A distant voice paging a doctor. The hum of a generator. Obinna, his mother said, do you remember what I told you the last time you came to see me? His heart had stopped. It stopped the way a clock stops when the battery dies. not with a dramatic sound, but with a sudden total silence. Yes, Mama, I remember. Tell me, he swallowed. You said I should not let anyone use hunger to buy my integrity. And what did you promise me? I promised that I won't. Another pause. Then Adaeze spoke, and her words were slow and deliberate, each one placed carefully, like a woman arranging precious stones. My son, I don't know how much time God will give me on this earth. Maybe it's plenty, maybe it is small. But I know this. If I leave this world tomorrow, the only thing I will take with me is the knowledge of who my son is. Not how much money he has, not what car he drives, but who he is. Do you understand me? Yes, Mama. Good. Now go and sleep. God is awake. She hung up. Obinna sat on the floor, holding the phone against his chest, and he breathed. He breathed the way a man breathes when he has been underwater, and finally breaks the surface. Deep, desperate, grateful. He sat there for what felt like an hour. Then he picked up his phone and called Chidi. Chidi, guy waiting sap, we still dey move tomorrow night. Abi, I'm not going. Silence. Obinna waiting you dey talk, we don't plan everything. I know, but I'm not going. Chidi's voice changed. It became lower, more urgent. Obinna, think about this. 200,000 naira, your mama's hospital bill. You go fit settle everything. Just this one time. I know what it can settle, Chidi. But there are some things that money cannot fix. If I go on that trip and something happens, what then? Who will take care of my mother? Who will look after Nkechi? And even if nothing happens, even if I deliver the package and collect the money and come back safely, I will know. I will carry it. My mother will look at me and she will not know what I did. But I will know. And that knowledge will sit between us like a wall. Chidi was quiet. I promised my mother, Chidi. I looked her in the eye and I promised her. And that promise is the last valuable thing I have left. If I break it, I am truly broke. Chidi sighed. It was a long sigh, the kind that carries respect even when it disagrees. So what thing you go do about the hospital bill? I don't know. But I will find another way. They said goodnight. Obinna lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling fan. It was still clicking, still turning slowly. The room was warm. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have the money. He had nothing except a promise, and the stubborn and reasonable belief that keeping it would somehow matter. Friday came. Chidi left for Lagos without him. Obinna watched from the window as Chidi walked to the junction to catch a bus, carrying a small bag. Chidi turned once and looked back toward the building, as if hoping Obinna might change his mind. Then he turned away and kept walking. Obinna spent that Friday doing something he hadn't done in weeks. He went from door to door in the neighborhood, offering to repair anything that needed fixing. Generators, fans, pumps. He was a mechanical engineering student after all. He hadn't spent 7 years studying for nothing. By evening, he had earned 4,000 naira. It was nothing compared to what he needed. But it was clean, it was honest. And somehow, impossibly, it felt heavier in his pocket than 200,000 of Oga Tony's money ever could. Saturday morning, he wrote a message and posted it in several WhatsApp groups. The message was simple. Final year mechanical engineering student available for generator repairs, welding, consultation, and general mechanical work. Affordable rates. Contact Obinna. He added his phone number. By afternoon, he had received 3 calls. One was from a woman in New Haven, whose generator had been faulty for weeks. Another was from a church that needed someone to look at their water pump. The third was from a man who ran a small workshop and needed an extra hand. None of these jobs would give him 150,000 naira by Monday. He knew that. But they were steps, small honest steps. On Saturday evening, Obinna called Nkechi. Nkechi, I need you to go to the hospital and talk to the billing office. Tell them we will pay the full amount, but we need 2 more weeks. Tell them our family has always paid. Tell them we are not running away. Ask them for grace. Enkechi was silent for a moment. Then she said, and if they say no, then we will go to Mama's church. We will go to the parish priest. We will explain the situation. Mama has been a member of that church for 30 years. They will help, and if they don't, then we will try something else. But we will keep trying. That is all we can do. Nkechi agreed. She could hear something in her brother's voice, a calmness that had not been there before. A settledness, as if he had made peace with something. And he had. Sunday morning, Obinna woke up early. He bathed, dressed, and walked to the small Catholic church near his house. He sat in the back pew and listened to the readings and the homily and the prayers. And when it was time for the offertory, he put 500 naira in the basket. It was a large percentage of what he had, but he gave it willingly, because generosity is not about the size of the gift. It is about the condition of the heart that gives it. After Mass, he was walking home when his phone rang. It was Chidi. Obinna. Chidi, how far? You don't come back. There was a strange quality to Chidi's voice. It was thin, stretched, like a rubber band pulled too far. Obinna, I'm in trouble. Obinna stopped walking. He stood on the side of the road, between a woman selling oranges and a man pushing a wheelbarrow, and the world around him continued to move. But he stood still. What happened? They arrested us. Police. We never even reached the delivery point. Them stop the vehicle for checkpoint. Them search the bag. Obinna, you no go believe wetin dey inside that bag. Obinna didn't ask. He didn't need to. I dey police station now. Them say na trafficking. Them dey talk about charging us to court. Obinna, I dey fear. Obinna's legs felt weak. He leaned against the wall. Where are you? Somewhere in Lagos. I don't even know the area well. Obinna, if I call my family, my mother go die. You know how my mama dey. She no go survive this kind news. There it was, the sound of a life unraveling. The sound of a young man who had taken what seemed like the easy road, and discovered that it was not a road at all. It was a cliff. Obinna listened. He listened as Chidi's voice broke and mended and broke again. He listened without judgment, because judgment is easy when you are not the one standing in the fire. And he listened because Chidi was his friend, his brother in the struggle, the boy who had shared his last sachet of pure water with him during the third strike. Chidi, listen to me. You need to call your family. I know it is hard, but you need them now. And you need a lawyer. Is there anyone there who can help? They talked for 20 minutes. Obinna gave him the only advice he could give. Then they hung up. And Obinna stood against that wall for a long time, breathing. He thought about Saturday, about how close he had come. If he had gone on that trip, he would be in that police station right now. He would be the one making that call. He would be the one whose life was about to change in a direction that no amount of 200,000 naira could fix. The distance between his current reality and that reality was one decision. One single decision, the width of a promise. And for the first time, Obinna understood something his mother had been trying to tell him all his life. Integrity is not a luxury for people who can afford it. It is not something you practice only when times are good. It is the thing that holds you when everything else lets go. It is the floor beneath the floor, the last ground that does not shift. The weeks that followed were not easy. Let me not lie to you and tell you that everything immediately became fine. That is not how life works. Life does not reward good decisions with instant miracles. Sometimes it rewards them with more struggle. But it is a different kind of struggle. A struggle with dignity. A struggle you can endure. Because your conscience is clear and your name is clean. Obinna worked. He worked every day. He repaired generators, he fixed pumps, he welded gates, he did small jobs and big jobs and every job in between. His hands grew rough. His clothes grew old. But his phone kept ringing. because he did good work and people told other people, and that is how it has always been. Word of mouth traveling faster than any advertisement. Nekechi went to the hospital. She spoke to the billing office. She spoke with the calm determination of a girl who had grown up too fast but had not grown hard. The hospital gave them 2 weeks grace. Nkechi went to the church. She spoke to the parish priest, Father Emmanuel, a man who had known Adaeze for decades, who had baptized both her children, who had watched her sit in the same pew every Sunday for 30 years or shine. Father Emmanuel listened. Then he spoke to the parish council. Then the parish council made an announcement. And the following Sunday, after Mass, members of the church contributed. Some gave 5,000, some gave 10. One woman, a trader who sold provisions in the market, gave 20,000 and said, "Tell Adize that I am praying for her. She helped me once when nobody else would." In total, the church raised 87,000 naira. It was not enough, but combined with what Obinna had earned and what Nkechi had saved from her small trading, they reached 140,000. They were still 10,000 short. On the day before the deadline, Obinna received a phone call from the man who ran the workshop, the one who had hired him as an extra hand. The man's name was Mr. Emeka. He was a quiet, hard-working man in his 50s, the kind of man who said little but noticed everything. "Obinna," Mr. Emeka said, "you have been working well. I want to offer you something. I have a contract to repair the generator at a hotel in town. It is a big job. I need someone I can trust. If you do it, I will pay you 15,000 naira." 15,000 naira. That was 5,000 more than what Obinna needed. "When?" Obinna asked. "Today. We start now, we finish by tonight." Obinna closed his eyes. Then he opened them. "I'm on my way." He worked on that generator for 9 hours. 9 hours in the sun, in the heat, with grease on his hands and sweat on his face, and the smell of diesel in his clothes. 9 hours of tightening and testing and troubleshooting and starting over. 9 hours that felt like a journey. When the generator roared to life, clean and strong, the hotel manager smiled and shook Obinna's hand, and Mr. Emeka counted out 15,000 naira and placed it in Obinna's palm. Obinna looked at the money. 15,000 naira. Earned. Honest his. He called Nkechi immediately. "We have enough. Pay the hospital tomorrow morning." Nkechi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you, brother." And in those 3 words, in the way her voice trembled slightly on the last syllable, was everything. Every sacrifice. Every sleepless night. Every plate of gari eaten in silence. All of it held in 3 words. The hospital bill was paid. Adize's treatment continued. Now, let me tell you what happened to Chidi. Chidi spent 3 weeks in police custody before his family could arrange bail. The charges were serious: trafficking, conspiracy, possession. The contents of the bag that Chidi had chosen not to ask about, turned out to be substances that carried a minimum sentence of 10 years. 10 years, think about that. A boy who entered the university to spend 4 years and earn a degree could now spend 10 years in prison with nothing but regret. Chidi's case went to court. It dragged on for months. His family spent money they didn't have on lawyers who made promises they couldn't keep. His mother, the woman Chidi had been afraid to call, aged 10 years in the span of 3 months. Her hair turned gray. Her laughter disappeared. Eventually, through a combination of legal effort and what some might call grace, Chidi's sentence was reduced. He was convicted of a lesser charge and sentenced to 2 years. 2 years. By the time he would come out, his coursemates, the ones who had not gone on that trip, would have long since graduated and moved on. Obinna visited Chidi once, at the correctional facility. They sat across from each other at a metal table, and Chidi looked different. Thinner, quieter. The loudness that had once defined him was gone, replaced by something else, something that looked a lot like wisdom, purchased at a price no one would willingly pay. Obinna, Chidi said, you were right, I should have listened. Obinna didn't say I told you so. That is what small people do. Instead, he held Chidi's hand across the table and said, when you come out, we will move forward together. Chidi nodded. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. He had done enough crying. Months passed. ASUU eventually called off the strike. As always, it ended not with a satisfying resolution, but with a tired compromise, the kind where both sides claim victory, and the students, as usual, bear the cost of the delay. Obinna returned to campus. He dusted off his project work. He met with his supervisor, who had aged visibly during the strike. The man's own salary had been withheld for months. They resumed work. And here's where I want you to pay close attention. Obinna graduated. He graduated not with a first class, not with any special honors. He graduated with a 2Y1, a solid, respectable result. He walked across that stage in his gown and cap, and he collected his certificate, and in the audience, sitting in a wheelchair that Nkechi had borrowed from the church, was Adaeze. She was there. Against the doctor's advice, against Nkechi's protests, against the complaints of her own failing body. She was there. She had insisted. I will see my son graduate, she had said, even if they have to carry me. And so they did. Nkechi wheeled her into the auditorium, and Adaeze sat there, thin and fragile, wrapped in her best wrapper, the blue and gold one she had been saving for a special occasion. And she watched her son's name being called, Obinna Chukwuemeka Ninwosu. He walked across the stage. He collected the certificate. He turned and looked into the audience, and his eyes found her. She was smiling, that gap-toothed smile, the one that could light a room, the one that had been his compass for as long as he could remember. She raised one hand, a small wave, a gentle acknowledgement, and Obinna, standing on that stage holding his certificate, felt something release inside him. A knot that had been there for years, maybe for his whole life, loosened and fell away. And in its place was something light, something free. He had kept his promise. Now, I wish I could tell you that Adaeze recovered. I wish I could tell you that the cancer retreated, that she left the hospital and went back to her roadside stall and fried akara again in the early morning darkness. I wish I could tell you that. But I will not lie to you. That is not what this story is about. Adaeze passed away 4 months after Obinna's graduation. She died on a Thursday evening in the hospital in Enugu, with Nkechi holding her left hand and Obinna holding her right. The sun was setting outside the window, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the room was quiet except for the sound of her breathing, which grew softer and softer until it was no longer there. In her final moments, she looked at Obinna. She looked at him with those clear, steady eyes, and she said one word, good. Just that, good. As if she was answering a question that only she had heard. As if she was giving her final assessment, her final verdict on the life she had lived and the son she had raised. Good. Obinna buried his mother in Nsukka, in the compound where she had raised him. The funeral was small. Not many people came. But the ones who came, they came with their whole hearts. Father Emmanuel said the mass. The women of the church sang. Nkechi stood beside Obinna, tall and strong, a young woman now, carrying her mother's quiet strength. After the funeral, Obinna stood alone at the graveside. The mourners had gone. The sun was low. The compound was still. He stood there and he said, Mama, I kept my promise. The wind blew softly through the palm trees. A bird sang somewhere in the distance. And Obinna stood there, a young man with no money, no connections, no powerful relatives, no shortcuts. A young man with nothing but a degree he had fought for, a name he had kept clean, and the memory of a woman who had loved him enough to ask for the hardest thing. She had asked him to be good. In a world that rewards cleverness, she had asked for goodness. In a country where survival sometimes seems to require compromise, she had asked him to stand. And he had. This story doesn't end with Obinna becoming a millionaire. It doesn't end with him driving a fancy car or building a mansion. That is not the point. The point is this: 3 years after his mother's death, Obinna was working as an engineer in a small firm in Enugu. The pay was modest. The work was hard, but he was building something. Slowly, honestly, brick by brick. One evening, he received a phone call from a number he didn't recognize. The caller introduced himself as the managing director of a construction company in Lagos. The man said he had been given Obinna's name by Mr. Emeka, the workshop owner, who had described Obinna as the most trustworthy young man I have ever worked with. The managing director offered Obinna a position, a real position, with a real salary, the kind of opportunity that doesn't come from knowing somebody or paying somebody, the kind that comes from being known as somebody. Obinna accepted. The night before he left for Lagos, he drove to his mother's grave. He sat on the ground beside it and he talked to her. He told her about the job. He told her about Nkechi, who had gone back to school and was now studying nursing. He told her about Chidi, who had been released from prison and was slowly rebuilding his life. And then he said something that I want you to carry with you. He said, "Mama, you were right. The road was long, the road was hard, but it was the right road. And because it was the right road, I can walk it with my head up." He sat there for a while, in the quiet of the evening, with the stars beginning to appear above him, one by one, like promises being kept. And then he stood up, dusted his trousers, and walked toward his future. Let me leave you with this. There is a saying among our people. I told you at the beginning to remember it. The goat that stays too long in the market eventually forgets the road home. Obinna stayed long in the market. 7 years in a university that should have taken 4. Strikes and delays and disappointments and temptations. The market was loud. The market was confusing. The market offered him things that glittered and things that promised quick relief. But Obinna never forgot the road home. His home was not a place, it was a principle. It was a promise made to a woman who fried akara in the dark so that he could stand in the light. And because he remembered the road, he found his way. Now, this story is not just about Obinna. It is about every young person in this country who has been pushed to the edge and told to jump. It is about every student who has sat in a room during a strike, watching the weeks turn to months, wondering if the system will ever work for them. It is about every mother who has sold her last wrapper to pay a school fee. It is about every Nkechi who has put her own dreams aside so that someone else's can survive. It is about the choices we make when no one is watching, the promises we keep when keeping them costs us everything. And it is about this truth, simple and ancient and unbreakable. Who you are will always matter more than what you have. Hold that. Keep it. Pass it on. That is the story. And that is how it ends. Not with fireworks. Not with applause. But with a man standing upright, walking forward, clean. For more, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to your friends. Good night.